of you. So I'm here to give you the answers for economics part and agriculture part of our GS paper 3 2025. Thankfully, the paper was on expected lines, except for a couple of questions here or there, which was quite surprising in a sense that one would not expect UPSC to go into so many indices, but otherwise. So, straight away starting. First question, distinguish between Human Development Index and inequality adjusted HDI with special reference to India. Why is the HDI considered a better indicator of inclusive growth? अब देखिए इस क्वेश्चन के दो तीन पार्ट्स हैं. पहला, डिस्टिंग्विश बिटवीन HDI एंड इनइक्वालिटी एडजस्टेड HDI with special reference to India. और दूसरा, why is IHDI considered a better indicator of inclusive growth? 150 words, we had to write it. So you can introduce it by suggesting something like this. Say when we write answer 1, HDI was introduced in 1990 to assure that human development is understood beyond the concept of only growth. All right. HDI was introduced in 1990 to assure that human development is understood beyond the concept of only growth of GDP. It consists of health measured by life expectancy, education measured as an average of mean years of education for adults and expected years of education for children joining school and standard of living measured as GNP or gross national income per capita in dollar terms, purchasing power parity. So this is something that we introduce, and in a 10 marker it is always advisable that you should introduce by writing the part of the answer also, so that we don't have to spend a lot of extra energy and words on introducing and then explaining the answer. So in first part, what we do, we talk about what is HDI, when was it introduced, and what was the objective of introducing it, how is it measured. All right, so this is one thing you can write, that it was introduced in 1990 to assure that human development is understood beyond the concept of growth of GDP and consists of health, education, and standard of living. Also, then you can write HDI is calculated by geometric mean of health, education, and standard of living. Then you write HDI was criticized that it did not consider the impact of inequality, and from 2010 inequality adjusted HDI has been introduced. In IHDI, so that is inequality adjusted HDI. In IHDI, Atkinson's index is used to adjust each parameter with prevailing level of inequality in the country. India's HDI score has been 0.67. Now, I'm giving you the HDI score for 24. Of course, for 25, we can get a separate number. But India's HDI score has been, in fact, 0.68. But adjusted for inequality, it drops by more than 25% to 0.47, showing inequality in access mainly to education and standard of living. So that is what India's HDI has shown: inequality to access mainly of education and standard of living. So that ways you are answering the question that how inequality adjusted HDI is different from the the actual HDI. Of course, I'm not giving you a model answer. I'm trying to give you more knowledge also apart while teaching you this. For next IAS students, if you recall, when we were discussing our current affair before prelims class, I had been discussing this topic with you, HDI and inequality adjusted HDI, etc. So from there, I hope you have been able to answer it. And for optional economics students, of course, it must be a simpler one for you, surely. Now, how is HDI different from inequality adjusted HDI? मेरा एक suggestion है यहाँ, कि जितनी information मैंने आपको यहाँ तक दी है, this should be written in 80 words. I gave you around 125, 130 words, but this should be written in 80, 85 words. That's the main points. And then we move to the next 35 words on how the HDI is different from inequality adjusted HDI. So key differences between HDI and inequality adjusted HDI. key differences between HDI and inequality adjusted HDI. So one, HDI assumes potential human development with equal accessibility to resource, while IHDI assumes, IHDI shows actual development considering access to resource. Then second is IHDI is more deviated from HDI because it uses deprivation for penalizing a country's points and it considers actual inequality data. And then third, IHDI is better for policy formulation compared to HDI because it uses Atkinson's index. So these are the three differences between HDI and IHDI. And then we can the next part of the, so this again I am giving you the detailed talk, but again this should be written in 30 words, not more than that. 30 words, 35 words, 30 words in fact, 10 words on each. And then we talk about the next part, that in what sense is HDI also considered as a better measure. So three parts also can be used here. We can talk about how IHDI is a better measure also. So this is different. And then IHDI is a better measure of human development, because it is more useful in policy making, it considers accessibility to resources, not only availability, that is another thing. And then it measures average achievements, but IHDI actually reveals the hidden inequalities. So HDI measures average achievements, but IHDI reveals hidden inequalities that we observe, and IHDI shows the vulnerability of trickle down which HDI doesn't show entirely. And then you will conclude that therefore in India's context, IHDI can be used as a better measure of inequality, as a better measure of human development, and even challenges of inequality can be resolved by using IHDI. In India's context, IHDI can be used as a better measure of policy development, and it can be used for solving the challenges of inequality. That is how you can conclude the answer. Okay, then the next question that was asked, and this was a very expected question: what are the challenges before Indian economy when the world is moving away from free trade and multilateralism to protectionism and bilateralism? How can these challenges be made? दो पार्ट है अगेन क्वेश्चन के. Challenges when world is moving away from multilateralism to bilateralism and protectionism, and how can these challenges be answered? So the first thing then we talk about, तो again जब तुम introduction लिखोगे answer 2, we can write the phase of globalization with multilateral institutions initiated after Washington Consensus has been struggling after subprime crisis and ये चल रहा है ना सुनील हमारा, and now it has been brought to a halt by tariff measures of USA. ये एक इंट्रोडक्शन हो सकता है. अगर आप डेटा पॉइंट्स याद रखते हैं तो आप लिख सकते हैं और it has been observed that after WTO and IMF guidance in 1990s, the bilateral agreements had almost halted, but with failure of multilateralism after neoliberal reforms, and subprime crisis the bilateral or regional agreements have increased by 20% in the last decade itself actually. तो अगेन तुम पहला इंट्रोडक्शन भी चूज कर सकते हो, तुम दूसरा इंट्रोडक्शन भी चूज कर सकते हो. The basic idea is to give the examiner the message that I understand that you have asked me this question because of American tariffs and because of failure of multilateralism in getting proper solutions and so on. So again, make sure 25 to 30 words for introduction. Then the question is, what are the challenges for Indian economy? So we go into that. Challenges for Indian economy. And within challenges for Indian economy, number one, we will take it as that. Losses due to supply chain fragmentation as countries are reshoring production. एंथनी ब्लिंकन जो पिछले अमेरिकन सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट थे, उन्होंने एक टर्म यूज किया था, फ्रेंड शोरिंग. So rather than offshoring, we are friend shoring. He had said that. So as we reshored the things. So that is one that can happen, which will happen plus per se. And India will then risk getting excluded from supply chain hubs. So this is losses due to supply chain fragmentation and continuous reshoring production, which might lead to exclusion. The second challenge we face, erosion of market access, which restricts export growth with rising tariff and non-tariff barrier. Then the other challenge is weaker multilateral remedies. All right, multilateralism failing. So failure of WTO dispute settlement and consensus development leads to weaker bargaining power by developing countries, for developing countries like India. Be weaker bargaining power for developing countries like India. Another challenge is that there is high possibility of inflation and volatility of supply chain. That is the fourth challenge. High possibility of inflation and volatility in the market. The fifth challenge is threat to employment for Indians abroad and inflow of remittance. So, again, introduction 30 words, use 50 words for these 5 points explaining what is the how is this challenge going up, and then conclude by suggest the solutions as I had suggested for promoting Indian exports, Indian investments. So, solutions, ways to meet these challenges. 1. Internal legislative administrative and judicial reforms to make structure resilient. Administrative reforms like better protection to property rights, judicial reforms like larger number of benches, faster resolution of cases, legislative reforms like intellectual property rights, environmental protection rights. These things have to be improved. Second is promoting better infrastructure to reduce logistical costs. Third, improving input market reforms. Input market means labor, land, capital. So, input market reforms to make inputs cheaper and accessible. So, if you do that, you make Indian industries more efficient. Then, faster conclusion of bilateral FTA with major trading partners like USA, European Union, etc. Then diversification of markets for export towards West Asia, East Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Then improving the strength of multilateral institutions like WTO by using understanding with like-minded countries. promoting global presence by joining trade agreements like CPTPP, which don't have either China or USA, and then leveraging expertise in service sector to promote service growth. Mind you, no tariff is imposed on services, service growth, especially services like tourism. So that is the answer to the second part. How can these challenges be met? And then you can reframe the answer. Conclude the answer by saying that the retreat from multilateral free trade is a re-optimization problem, not a terminal decline. Retreat from multilateral free trade is a re-optimization problem. Re-optimization is you had a challenge, now the challenge has changed, so you re-optimize. So re-optimization problem, not a terminal decline. So by developing alliances, hardening competitiveness at home, and leveraging services and sustainability, India can always withstand the new protectionist policies and should find opportunities in it. That should be your concluding system. That we should not get worried about it, we should find opportunities in it. All right. Then they asked us again crop diversification का question पूछा उन्होंने और इकोनॉमिक सर्वे पूरा छाया हुआ था इस पेपर में. कम से कम 6 क्वेश्चंस के आंसर आप कर सकते थे 8 में से by just using economic survey. Second question and third question both could have been answered even if only economic survey could have been used. So the third question they asked us, explain the factors influencing the decision of the farmers on selection of high value crops in India. Now you can introduce such thing with a data point if you have read economic survey or if you have gone through Ministry of Agriculture's website. The data point is this. You can introduce it like that. Answer 3. Out of total agricultural production of rupees 56 trillion in 2023. Of course, we don't have data after that in totality, but in 2023, food grains contributed 17%, 17, while high value products like fruits, vegetables, mind you, these are your high value products, fruits, vegetables, and spices contributed 26%, while cash crops contributed 11%. So, of course, then forestry was 7%, and then other allied activities were the rest, 35%. So, this is something you can introduce. And then you can talk about the key factors influencing the decision. The increase in high value produce is due to, अब पता है तुम्हें क्या यूज करना था यहाँ क्लास में जो हम लोग डिस्कस करते थे, अगर तुम्हें याद हो वी डिस्कस इन द क्लासरूम दैट what are the steps needed to promote agricultural diversification. So those steps is what you have to bring in here, that what are the steps government has taken for agricultural diversification, like say an ENAM, soil health card, and so on. So first of all, one, promotion of extension services by government like PM FBY, PM FBY, soil health card, etc. क्योंकि यही हमारा मेन क्वेश्चन है, क्या फैक्टर्स हैं जो सिलेक्शन ऑफ हाई वैल्यू क्रॉप्स करते हैं इंडिया में. सेकंड, एक्सेस टू इरिगेशन विथ पीएम कृषि सिंचाई योजना एंड स्पेशल फोकस ऑन micro irrigation. Third, so this is again something where infrastructure has helped. Third, creating access to market by developing agricultural boards like turmeric board and giving digital support like ENAM. Then of course you can write better pricing possibility with growth of processing industry as seen in case of fruits with juice industry. Then better export potential reflected in rise of exports of floriculture to above $86 million as reported by Economics Survey. Economic Survey this year reported that floriculture has increased quite a bit, and that has helped in getting better returns. And then promotion of food processing and infrastructure by government schemes like PM Kisan Sampada, So this is something which has helped in promoting a lot of regional development of processing units, and that has given a lot of growth per se. But apart from that, apart from PM Kisan Sampada, we can also talk about PLI for food processing. Then development of marketing infrastructure in spices, tea, and coffee, with rise in export potential and government schemes like development of micro food processing. So, and then one more, I forgot, sorry. One more. Increased access to credit resulted in reducing cost of doing business. So these are things you can write. You can also talk about contract farming development and agricultural linkages with the industry. बट ये 7-8 पॉइंट आप अगर लिखते हैं 10-15 वर्ड ईच करके 15-15 वर्ड, तो 25 words introduction, 100 words of these points, and then 25 words conclusion, suggesting that high value crops have shown an increasing trend, but they can increase further if government shows more inclination towards climate resilience varieties, insurance facilities, credit facilities, marketing infrastructure facilities, all of which will take a vital step in taking India of becoming a Viksit Bharat by 2047. Then next question was, elaborate the scope and significance of supply chain management of agricultural commodities in India. अब समझिएगा, स्कोप का मतलब होता है कि क्या किया जा सकता है, और सिग्निफिकेंस का मतलब होता है रिजल्ट क्या होंगे ये करने से. Scope means what can be done, significance means what can be the result. So the question, I repeat, was elaborate the scope and significance of supply chain management of agricultural commodities in India. All right. Again, you can introduce it by saying that agriculture contributes to 18% of GDP and employs 46% of the workforce. However, due to post-harvest losses and inefficiency of marketing, it results in losses for the farmers and lack of productivity enhancement. ये आपका introduction हो सकता है. All right, this can be your introduction. Then comes the point, what is the scope of supply chain management of agricultural commodities? फिर ध्यान रखिएगा, scope and significance. So what is the scope of supply chain management of agricultural commodities in India? तो जैसा मैंने कहा, agriculture contributes 17%, 18% of GDP, employs 46% of the workforce, but inefficiencies in agricultural supply chain lead to less productivity and low income for the farmers. This can be your introduction. So now, how do we improve upon the scope part? That is the elaboration they are looking for. पता है ये क्वेश्चन बार बार आ चुका है. अगर आपको याद हो, क्लासरूम में भी मैं आपको पढ़ाता हूँ ये as the upstream problems of agricultural marketing, downstream problems of agricultural marketing and the solutions. तो यहाँ solution और problem को मिलाकर लिखने को कह रहे हैं हमें. But 150 words का है, so we can't go into too many details of it, but we have to mention the point and get ahead with it. So after introduction, then we talk about, this is answer 4, we talk about scope, So first of all, you will write here, it can improve both equity and efficiency. And then write the scope. So what is the scope? क्या possibilities हैं? So it will reduce post-harvest losses due to sudden rain, hailstorm, etc. आप चाहें तो अपने क्वेश्चन के इंट्रोडक्शन में मीनिंग ऑफ सप्लाई चेन इन एग्रीकल्चरल कमोडिटीज से भी इंट्रोड्यूस कर सकते हैं. You can introduce your question by saying that agricultural supply chain consists of storage, transportation, infrastructure in the markets of agriculture, scope of selling to different markets, possibilities of processing in agriculture, all that is agricultural supply chain. So you can use it that ways also. All right, production, storage, processing, retail and marketing. All that is a part of processing, logistics and retail. Production, storage, processing, logistics and retail. Everything is a part of agricultural supply chain. So you can write it that way also. कहीं ना कहीं से डालना जरूर इंट्रोडक्शन में ही that what is the meaning of supply chain marketing और फिर इन चीज़ों पे आओगे स्कोप पे. So contribution of agriculture, meaning of agricultural process, say supply chain, and then this. All right. Okay. So reducing post-harvest losses, that is one thing. You can write here economic survey 25 shows that post-harvest losses led to 30% of fruits and vegetables lost in India. So this can be one thing. Another is, this is another scope, expanding infrastructure and connectivity. So if you expand infrastructure and connectivity like Krishi Udan, dedicated freight corridor, etc., to promote development of high value agriculture. Then next, so this is the second thing we will write. Then next, third thing that we write is promoting institutions to provide, see, these are institutional reforms you will talk about. So to provide marketing like ENAM, infrastructure development of APMC markets, by promoting state government incentives, promotion of multiple crops, etc. Then the next thing in scope you can bring is innovation and research and development. innovation and research and development to increase climate resilience, longer shelf life of product, better sanitary results is hygiene, etc., etc. Then, of course, leveraging existing infrastructure, what already exists, which we should leverage it, leveraging existing infrastructure, which is like using FCI, using NAFED, using TRIFED, FCI, NAFED, TRIFED, etc. for agricultural marketing, and then promoting export potential by diversifying towards high value crop. So these are the scope. What is the significance? इसका result क्या होगा? अगर हम ये सब कुछ करेंगे तो इसका result क्या होगा? ये तो scope हुआ. So when it comes to significance, I am giving you the points and I have full confidence you can elaborate. It can expand and promote income opportunities for farmers. It can promote occupational possibilities due to supply chain development like production, supply chain development like production, storage, processing, like in production, logistics and retailing. तो हर जगह लोग एम्प्लॉयड होंगे इसकी वजह से जब ऐसा किया जाएगा तो प्रोडक्शन करने में, स्टोर करने में, प्रोसेस करने में, ट्रांसपोर्ट करने में, स्टोर करने में, रिटेल करने में, हर जगह लोगों की एम्प्लॉयमेंट होगी. एंड देन ऑफ कोर्स देयर विल बी बेटर मैनेजमेंट in restricting inflation, and then it will make exports competitive. As we do this, because better supply chain will mean better export opportunities, and then of course it will lead to ecological sustainability, because people will do crop diversification, wastages will be reduced, etc. And then conclude by saying that therefore the supply chain management of agriculture is an essential prospect now, considering that Indian agriculture is gradually shifting from being a surplus agriculture, a deficit agriculture, to surplus agriculture. India has traveled a long distance from being food to ship, a ship to mouth. That is, we used to import food to survive. So we have traveled a long distance from being ship to mouth to going to becoming one of the largest exporters in agricultural sector. So this kind of thing you can use for conclusion. Okay. The next question that economics asked you was question number 11, and it asked, explain how the fiscal health index can be used as a tool for assessing the fiscal performance of states in India. In what way would it encourage the states to adopt prudent and sustainable fiscal policies? Now, in the answer you will write, this was again an unexpected question generally, but in economic survey we had covered fiscal health index, components of fiscal health index and condition of states in fiscal health index. आप अगर economics survey का class किए होंगे तो बड़े आराम से इसका जवाब दे सकते थे आप. All right, so fiscal health index is a tool developed by Niti Aayog to assess the health, the fiscal health of states in India. Fiscal health of states in India. एंड इसके डायमेंशंस अगर आप लिखेंगे तो बहुत अच्छा होगा, इसलिए मैंने कहा कि अगर इकोनॉमिक सर्वे पढ़े होगे मेरे साथ तो डेफिनेटली इसका आंसर कर सकते थे. एनीवेज, सो इट कवर्स 5 डायमेंशंस. It covers 5 dimensions of क्वालिटी ऑफ एक्सपेंडिचर, कि जहां खर्च कर रहे हैं स्टेट वो कैसा खर्चा है, रेवेन्यू है, कैपिटल है एंड सो ऑन. देन रेवेन्यू मोबिलाइजेशन, अपने टैक्सेस कितने मोबिलाइज कर पा रहे हैं या नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, सो रेवेन्यू मोबिलाइजेशन. देन fiscal prudence, that how prudent they are in making expenditures and so on. Then debt index, लोन के लेवल पे कहाँ है, एंड डेट सस्टेनेबिलिटी. ये 5 चीजों पे ये डिस्कशन होता है. Debt sustainability. All right, these are the 5 things on which fiscal health index gets measured. It's अब question ये था that what is the efficacy for assessing the fiscal performance and how will it encourage states to adopt prudent performance. So its efficacy can be seen in, now तो अगेन आप एक इंट्रोडक्शन लिख रहे हैं in around 20 words, 25 words, and then you come to efficacy. So number 1, comprehensiveness. It's comprehensive, it covers everything. So standardized comparison across 28 states, standardized comparison and across, sorry, it is not 28 states, my mistake. It is all the major states, 18 major states, which makes policy making easier. So central government can easily find out, क्योंकि ये comprehensive measure है, सभी states को same type of माप तौल पे देखा जाता है. The second is transparent. It has well established indicators which can be verified, reported and analyzed in real time. तो रियल टाइम पे वेरिफिकेशन हो सकती है, एनालिसिस हो सकती है, एंड डिस्कशन हो सकते हैं, यू नो. So there is no arbitrariness in evaluating state finances. No arbitrariness in evaluating state finances. The third thing that it achieves is specific in nature. It is specific. It doesn't beat around the bush. It doesn't talk about multiple things. So sub indices focus on particular specific policy dimensions. Specific policy dimensions. For example, Bihar performs well. So inter policy decisions can also be done कि एक स्टेट कहीं अच्छा कर रहा है, कहीं खराब कर रहा है. जैसे बिहार performs well on quality of expenditure, on quality of expenditure, but poorly on revenue mobilization. तो ऐसे एग्जाम्पल्स दे सकते हैं हम लोग, अगर हमें याद रहे तो. या केरला एलोकेट्स हेविली टू सोशल वेलफेयर एक्सपेंडिचर but struggles with debt accountability. So these are examples we can, debt sustainability we can give. And then we get a time period trend over a long time period, which will help in establishing better understanding of state fiscal. That is the fourth efficacy of FHI. The fourth thing we can write about. Provides long-term trend since 2014-15 regarding state finances, which helps in generating better results on managing them. Policy solutions, policy suggestions can be given much more clearly. So in this case, these are the four ways in which we can consider that it is very effective with respect to as an indicator. Then next part of the question was that the fiscal health index, how can it encourage the states to adopt prudent and sustainable fiscal policies? तो देखो इन चार पे 20-20 वर्ड तो मैंने ही तुम्हें दे दिए. तो 30 words introduction and approximately 80-90 words on these four. So that gives us 120 words. Then the efficacy part for states, that how states will become efficient. We will write 4-5 points there, again 20-25 words on each, and that will give us the 215-220 word. And then we will conclude suggesting that why fiscal health of the states is very important, because total government debt to GDP ratio is what investors consider, foreign investors consider, which leads to crowding out if it is high. So all those things you can use for conclusion. So we talk about FHI and prudent fiscal policy by the states. कि states कैसे करेंगे ऐसा. So one, fiscal discipline through competitive Federalism. And you can explain that if you publish tables of fiscal performance, automatically there will be better competition among states, and that will create a reputational incentive. And then high performers are rewarded with investors confidence and greater bargaining power with the center, and the poor performers will face the pressure to reform. तो ये दो चीजें यहाँ ऐड कर सकते हो, एक reputational benefit, and that will lead to states having incentives to perform well, and second, they will get better system from investors and government, and the poor ones will then have to improve. The second, focus on quality expenditure and not only quantity. Focus on quality expenditure and not only quantity. स्टेट सिर्फ इस बात को लेके नहीं निश्चिंत हो सकते कि मैंने खर्चा कर दिया, उन्हें अब ये दिखाना पड़ेगा कि कहाँ खर्च कर रहे हैं. So the fiscal health index evaluates how much is the developmental expenditure. It evaluates how much is the discipline in expenditure. So developmental expenditure, capital expenditure, so it is kind of nudging the states to move away from subsidies and move towards good quality expenditure. Also, once the states can cut down on expenditure on subsidy or wage payment without productivity enhancement, they will have more fiscal space to grow growth enhancing outlays. एक बार अगर सब्सिडी से थोड़ा सा कम निकाल, जैसे एग्रीकल्चर में फर्टिलाइजर पे बहुत सब्सिडी देने की जगह या इरिगेशन पे बहुत सब्सिडी देने की जगह, यूजिंग दैट सेम मनी फॉर डेवलपिंग इन्वेस्टमेंट इन एग्रीकल्चर, क्रॉप प्रोटेक्शन, fencing, micro irrigation, and all that will lead to better quality expenditure from the states. So focus on quality expenditure and not just quantity. जो मैं बोल रहा हूँ आप मार्क करते रहिए, तो आप उसी को अगर लिखेंगे तो 20-25 वर्ड्स होते जा रहे हैं ये. All right. And the third is debt sustainability. That is the third thing. Debt sustainability. Now, what does that imply? Debt sustainability is the index is already emphasizing on debt to gross state GDP ratio. So, the interest payment burden on the state is one way of checking whether debt is sustainable or not. Similarly, off-budget borrowings by the state is also highlighted here. So, interest burden, off-budget borrowings of the state, unsustainable fiscal populism, and that will again allow the states to become prudent, spend more on sustainable debt, pay back the interests that you have taken, and that will enhance the capacity to grow much better. And then, of course, it also helps in creating debt management framework within the state. That is the other thing on debt sustainability. तो एक तो डेट टू जीएसडीपी रेशियो को कम करने की तरफ ध्यान होगा, प्रोडक्टिव एक्सपेंडिचर पे ध्यान होगा, ये कोशिश होगी स्टेट की कि एक्सेसिव ऑफ बजट बोरोइंग ना करें, इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट बहुत ज़्यादा बर्डन ना डालें, और दूसरा कि डेट मैनेजमेंट फ्रेमवर्क बनाएं, जैसे पंजाब ने डेट मैनेजमेंट यूनिट बनाया है एक. एंड देन it will increase revenue mobilization efforts. So that's another thing. Revenue mobilization will increase कि भाई आप states के ऊपर ये pressure रहेगा कि आप own revenue बढ़ाएं. So they will be focusing not only on GST but also increasing the tax base, land revenue sometimes, house tax, and so on, to improve their revenue base. And then another one is encourages them to focus on efficiency of state public sector enterprises. India has more than 900 state public sector enterprises. Their total losses are around 70,000 crore. So we need to make sure they come into picture. So automatically, if state governments are made more revenue conscious and more budget conscious, the state public sector enterprises will be made more efficient. And then aligns the state policy to FRBM goals of controlling debt to GDP. Mind you, central government is already committed that they will control debt to GDP to approximately 50% by 2030. But according to the Finance Commission report under N.K. Singh, it was suggested that ideally India should have a debt GDP of 60%. So in the long run, if central government takes itself towards 40% debt to GDP, the state government should take themselves towards 20% debt to GDP. And so that is what you will be writing in the sixth point. So again, if you write these 6 points around 20 words each, it will give you 120 words, and then conclude by suggesting that fiscal health index is not only a ranking tool, it is also useful in policy improvement because it encourages Indian states to manage their fiscs better and for development oriented tasks. Then there was this next question, question 12. Discuss the rationale of PLI scheme. What are its achievements? In what way can the functioning and outcomes of the scheme can be improved? Rationale of PLI, what are its achievements, and in what way the functioning and outcomes of the scheme can be improved. This was straight away from the class notes that we did. So I'll again take you quickly through the discussion on this. So in this, first of all, explain what is PLI. Explain what is PLI. That under PLI, government gives fiscal incentive of 3 to 6% of targeted sales amount that has been fixed for a firm on incremental sales that it does over a 5-year period. It is the fiscal incentive that government has fixed on targeted sales amount that government gives to a firm as 3% to 6% of the incremental sales target that has been fixed by the government for the firm. It is applicable on 14 industries in India with a budget of 1.97 lakh crore. It is applicable on 14 industries in India with a budget of 1.97 lakh crore. It was initiated under Atmanirbhar Bharat announcements in 2020-21 and has continued since then, expanding its scope. So these are the things you will introduce initially, around 35-40 words, which I just told you. So 40 words introduction. अब इस क्वेश्चन के 2 पार्ट्स हैं, 3 पार्ट्स हैं इनफैक्ट, rationale, achievement and improvement. What is the rationale? What are the achievements? And what are the improvement that we see in that? So, first of all, rationale. तो 40 वर्ड आप लिख रहे हैं ऑन इंट्रोडक्शन. रैशनल में मैं आपको कुछ 5 पॉइंट बताऊंगा, उनमें 10-10 वर्ड लिखेंगे, 12-12 वर्ड लिखेंगे, तो वो 60 वर्ड हो जाएंगे. सो रैशनल, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, boosting domestic manufacturing to promote share of manufacturing in GDP. All right, this is one, boosting domestic manufacturing to promote share of manufacturing in GDP and to enhance India's choices in consumption. Second, to reduce import dependence in sectors like active chemical cells, active pharmaceutical ingredients, white goods, etc. To promote export propensity and make India an investment destination in China plus one strategy, Then fourth, integrate Indian manufacturing in global value chain. This can happen by promoting investments and exports also. Then generation of employment, textile, food processing, white goods. White goods are consumer durables which do not use a microchip in them. So all this will give you the generation of employment possibilities in the country. And then technological upgradation. This technological upgradation will happen because companies will be incentivized to innovate more, invest on research and development, and to become globally competitive. So that will foster innovation. So the basic idea is to make India one of the strongest pillars of manufacturing. So 6 points, 10, 12 words on each, and you will be able to write 70 words here. And then they asked that what has been the advantage of the scheme, what are its achievements. So achievements, 1, increased supply chain development in sectors like electronics, automobile, etc. In fact, if you look at electronics, today 99% of our mobile phones used are manufactured domestically. And in white goods sector, the value addition has increased from 15-20% earlier to around 70% now. These are all economic survey data that I'm giving you. Again, economic survey, I discussed PLI with you in some detail. And also, for air conditioner components, the key supply chains have developed. Electronic phone components, telephone that is, key supply chains have developed. So we can write those in this part. Second is increasing exports from India. Telecom is one example. फार्मा इज अनदर एग्जाम्पल. ये भी सीधा इकोनॉमिक सर्वे से पूछा उन्होंने. ये चौथा क्वेश्चन है जो सीधा इकोनॉमिक सर्वे से है. सो फार्मा एंड electronics, that also we see again. In fact, the pharmaceutical ingredients have now been decreased in India, imported from China, from 71% to 48% in the last 4 or 5 years. So that is another thing which has been happening with us, that pharmaceutical and medical devices have happened pretty well. Then, of course, when we talk about the automotive industry, along with that, what kind of improvement has been seen, we see that there is a significant improvement in high-tech automotive production. Significant improvement in high-tech automotive production. So this is third thing. Improvement in quality of production of commodities as observed in pharma, automobile, electronics, etc. Fourth, employment generation for more than 8 million people in sectors covered under PLI. This is SBI research that tells us that. Fifth, promoting growth of MSME as not only component suppliers but also as promoters themselves. That is another thing that we see. And sixth, promotes modern high value sectors like drones, advanced chemical cells, photovoltaic cells, etc. So we talked about fifth as sixth as promotes modern high value sectors like drones, etc. Now again, if you write 15, 17 words on each of them, you will get 100 words. ठीक है साउंड हमारा? ठीक है. So if we write it like this, then that means we have written it in approximately our 200 words are completed, and then they ask us ways to improve PLI functioning in India. So we can talk about first target outcomes and not just output. These are the ways to improve PLI in India. That is, how much is the foreign exchange coming in, how much is employment generated. So when we talk about further improvement that can be brought about, target outcomes also, and not only production. So how much is the outcome, foreign exchange reserves earned, employment generated, etc. Then another can be linking PLI to deepening of supply chain. For example, using more MSME as suppliers. That's another thing that we can plan for, that in the longer run. Then another is synchronizing PLI with tariffs and FTAs. Synchronizing PLI with tariffs and FTAs so that our trading partners don't throw a challenge on us that why are you giving this kind of a help. Another thing can be promoting infrastructure at the level needed to support PLI. Promoting infrastructure at the level needed to support PLI. Another is bringing transparency in awarding contracts to avoid charges of nepotism and corruption. That is another thing we need to do. And then bringing इनपुट मार्केट रिफॉर्म्स, लैंड, लेबर एंड कैपिटल, जो भी थोड़ी देर पहले मैं आपको कह रहा था, टू प्रमोट PLI. तो अगर आप इन 6 पॉइंट्स को 10 वर्ड्स में भी एक्सप्लेन कर देंगे तो 60 वर्ड्स वो हो गया. और कंक्लूजन में कहिए that PLI can be a very good beginning, but PLI cannot be the sole answer to challenges of manufacturing in India, because that will require better productivity enhancement, skill development of workers, infrastructure development, and so on, to again achieve sustainable and long-term growth of Indian agriculture, Indian industry. Then the next question was a very productive question. It is completely from the past year papers. Examine the scope of food processing industries in India. Elaborate the measures taken by government in food processing industries for generating employment opportunities. Another one from economic survey, straight away. अगर आपने economic survey किया, ये सवाल दे सकते थे, जवाब आप आराम से. सबसे पहले इसमें इंट्रोड्यूस करोगे by saying food processing or agro processing encompasses all the activities involved in taking the products to the consumer from the farmer, like cleaning, grading, sorting, refining, processing, roasting, etc. All right. तो ये food processing है. That food processing means all activities that involve an agricultural product from the farmer to the plate of the consumer, consisting of cleaning, ग्रेडिंग, सॉर्टिंग, छटनी करने को सॉर्ट करना कहते हैं, क्लीनिंग, ग्रेडिंग, सॉर्टिंग, रिफाइनिंग, प्रोसेसिंग, रोस्टिंग, blending, etc. All of it. Now, what is the scope of food processing industry in India? So, first of all, the scope for value addition is very high. क्या क्या chances हैं? Scope का मतलब होता है क्या किया जा सकता है इसमें, और फिर ऑफ कोर्स कि मेजर्स क्या लिए गए हैं गवर्नमेंट के द्वारा. तो ये है पहले स्कोप, और फिर क्या क्या किया गया है जो सरकार ने किया. तो पहला है स्कोप फॉर वैल्यू एडिशन. ऑलराइट, दैट इज वन. सो आई एम आंसरिंग फ्रॉम देयर. सो यू विल इंट्रोड्यूस अगेन इन 25-30 वर्ड्स द मीनिंग ऑफ फूड प्रोसेसिंग, एंड देन यू विल टॉक अबाउट व्हाट इज द स्कोप ऑफ फूड प्रोसेसिंग, and so on. So first of all, when we talk of scope, this is answer 14. So first you will write the introduction that I suggested, and then the scope part of food processing. So in scope, one is scope for value addition. ये अगर इकोनॉमिक सर्वे आपने किया होगा तो मैं आपके साथ डिस्कस कर रहा था वहाँ, that survey ये बताता है that processing levels for products like fruits, where it is only 4.5%, or vegetables, where it is only 2.7%, and milk, where it is only 2.1%, is far below our contemporaries like China, like USA. They're far below that. I mean, if you look at China, the processing levels are 30%. In European nations, it is 60 to 80%. This was in Economic Survey 24 that they gave us, so that notes can be made from there. All right, so 30% in China, very low compared to China or Western nations. तो ये एक बात आप बोल सकते हैं. Then the second is very fast rise in demand for processed food. Very fast rise in demand for processed food, not only in India but also in export market. इसमें कुछ डेटा मैं दे रहा हूं, आप रख सकते हैं, that India's food processing industry is expected to reach $535 billion worth of value by 2026. $535 billion. And the household consumption expenditure survey shows that dairy, poultry, fishery, these are heavily demanded products now, even in tier 2, tier 3 cities of India. Household consumption expenditure survey shows that dairy, poultry, fishery, heavily demanded in tier 2, tier 3 cities of India. And India has a potential to increase its processed agricultural exports by more than $30 billion in the next 10 years. More than $30 billion in next 10 years. So that is the second thing. The third thing is it promotes inclusive growth. Don't forget, it will be mostly in rural areas, medium scale to low level scale of operation, requires less skill relatively, and all that means that we are looking at promoting inclusive growth as another part of the scope there. Then another is that it will result in, so promotes employment, and reduces burdens like fragmentation of land holding, dependent population, poverty. Again, another thing that it does, another thing that it does is that it can serve government programs, local food processing can serve government programs like Poshan, Anganwadis, etc. Another thing it can do is that it can promote diversification of crop and safety from wastage. Foods, vegetables, wastages can be controlled and diversification can be done. And another thing it can do is that it can help in better income generation in rural areas, which will have its own multiplier effect. Better income generation in rural areas, better income generation in rural areas, creating multiplier effect. So these are the scopes that food processing brings for us. Then what are the government programs? Since we have had multiple discussion on these even in economic survey, so I'm not writing them down or dictating them to you, but I'm taking some names. I'm sure you will find them very familiar, like Pradhan Mantri formalization of micro food processing enterprises. This one scheme you can write, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana. Another scheme you can write, production linked incentive for food processing industry. Another one you can write. Then institutional and skill support by National Institutes of Food Technology, Entrepreneurship and Management. That is another thing you can write. Then infrastructure development support by government, like mega food parks and cold chains. Another thing, 14 mega food parks projects have already been approved. 41, sorry, 40. This is from economic survey, that 41 mega food park projects have already been approved, out of which 24 are operational and 17 are under implementation. So these are points you can write. I repeat again, Pradhan Mantri formalization of micro food processing enterprises, Pradhan Mantri formalization of micro food processing enterprises, you can write that scheme. Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana, second scheme. Production linked incentive scheme for food processing. In fact, there is a 10,000 crore rupees incentive in that. Then skill and institutional support for food processing. For one example I gave you was National Institutes of Food Technology, Entrepreneurship and Management. National Institute of Food Technology, Entrepreneurship and Management, which we have established. Then mega food parks and cold chains, which have been established. As I said, 41 operational, 41 approved, 24 operational. Then another is budgetary support having increased, rising to above 3,000 crore for food processing. Then one district, one product scheme to promote food processing. And then in the last few budgets, if you see, we have been in the budget of 25-26, 6,500 crore was given to food processing, and National Institute for Food Technology, Entrepreneurship and Management proposed in Bihar. Also, Makhana board proposed in Bihar. Turmeric board already established in Telangana. So you can give these kind of Andhra Pradesh, so you can give these examples per se about what has been done for food processing in the last few budgets and by the government, and conclude by suggesting that food processing is one of the largest employer, exporter and producer in India in manufacturing, due to which promoting food processing and improving it is very important. Now, another question that we were asked, India aims, this was question 16, this question can be science and tech, this question can be economics. India aims to become a semiconductor manufacturing hub. What are the challenges faced by semiconductor industry in India? And then mention the salient features of India's semiconductor mission. Again, remember, you will introduce by talking about the relevance of semiconductor in any economy's production units. So semiconductors are needed in cars, rockets, airplanes, televisions, mobile phones, laptops. So in today's world, no production can be envisioned without the presence of semiconductor. And therefore, Indian government also under Atmanirbhar Bharat program introduced the semiconductor program with 76,000 crore rupees worth of manufacturing support. That was a semicon mission that we introduced. Then the first question was, what are the challenges faced by semiconductor industry in India? So you will introduce in around 35-40 words talking about the relevance of semiconductor and the program launched by the government. But then they talked about what are the challenges, and then the next part was mention the salient features of Indian semiconductor mission. So when it comes to challenges faced by semiconductor industry in India, the challenges can be like these. One, these are challenges. One, it requires high capital intensity. High capital intensity, which will need large scale investment, while India is a capital scarce country. So this is one challenge, financing hurdle. Even a fab requires $5 billion, $10 billion investment. We have that challenge. The second is technology gap between India and others who started early will restrict India's speed of attracting investment from upper part of value chain, like designing. The upper part of value chain, like designing, the investment will be restricted because other countries like a South Korea or like a Japan, etc., even China in that case, America of course, have done much better than us. Then our third challenge is skill shortages. The number of engineers we have who can work in India, the training part is much lesser than ideally what we would need. So skill challenge is another problem. Another is infrastructure bottleneck. Infrastructure bottleneck. Infrastructure bottleneck, if you ask me, the challenge like, lack of uninterrupted power. We need power supply to a great extent. Then lithography infrastructure that is missing in India. Ultra pure water, advanced clean room facilities. These are few things which are missing. Then we also are heavily dependent on imported commodity requirements. The wafers have to be imported, lithographic C sheets have to be imported. Even the basic input the gases, etc., have to be imported, chemicals. So that is our high import dependence that exists. And then India is offering subsidies, but the challenge is CHIPS Act in US and many other countries like that. So global competition where other countries are also offering very high subsidy. And then, of course, the challenge of execution delays, lack of ease of doing business. We saw the cancelling of Foxconn Vedanta deal. So execution delays, that's another thing we see as a challenge. execution delays, and you can give example of Foxconn Vedanta deal as an execution delay. And then market fluctuations. The chip market, like any market, has huge cyclical fluctuations. Sometimes the demand is high, sometimes the demand is low, and we will be a new industry in it. So we will have to learn how to manage that. And then environmental concerns, uses a lot of clean water and uses a lot of energy. So our environmental concerns. These 9 points you have to write in around 10-12 words each. They will give you 108 words, 110 words. So 30-35 words introduction, 110 words here. And then you have to write another 100 word on or 90 words on Semicon India program. So we have already covered it quite a bit. I've given you these answers in your classroom, entire questions. In fact, thankfully, none of the questions were there that we had not done in the class. So I hope all of you could take it well. So you will talk about Semicon India program, 76,000 crore rupees program, launched in 2021. What are the main feature? One is provides 50% fiscal support, 50%, 50, provides 50% fiscal support for the semiconductor fabs, display fabs, compound semiconductors, and for ATMP facilities. So this is one thing you can write. Second is it includes design linked incentive scheme, includes design linked incentive scheme which supports startups and MSME to promote designing in India, and 41 applications are already approved with 133 million rupees already disbursed. Also, it covers financial grants, infrastructure development, R&D collaboration to integrate India into a global supply chain. So this is Semiconductor Mission, one part, policy framework and incentive. Semicon India program, design linked incentive scheme, and so on. Then we also have the specs, schemes for promotion of manufacturing of electronic components and semiconductors, 2020. You will talk about 25% reimbursement of capital expenditure. The budget is more than 3,000 crore. Then PLI scheme for semiconductors, and it has been expanded till since March 25. And then you will also talk about giving money like 16,500 crore for Ministry of Electronics and IT. You will also talk about the new semiconductor plants established in Sanand, Noida, Morangegaon in Assam. And then, conclude by suggesting, Dholera of course, conclude by suggesting that India needs to strengthen its R&D ecosystem, skill development of people, and supply chain integration, and promoting global partnerships to have a well-established semiconductor supply chain system. So these were the questions from economy. I hope now you have a well-brained answer on it, and I hope you had a good paper. Thank you, all of you. I'll keep trying to support you as much as I can and keep supporting me as much as you do. Thanks a lot. God bless you all.